Just a Little Dare by Hooliganships. Chapter 1 The Bet. It started innocently enough. Since the day they met, they had butted heads. Well, maybe not the day they met. On that day, there was a lot of screaming, and fighting, and bleeding, and other unpleasant things. But shortly after, when they were chasing after Nami, the bickering started. After that came the insulting and the name calling, and after that came the honest to God brawls. Now, brawls weren't an uncommon thing in the Straw Hat crew. Everyone fought sometimes, and it could be fun to wrestle. Not Zoro and Sanji, though. They were always at each other's throats, trying to one up the other in everything they did. Hunting? There was a competition about which one had brought in the bigger kill. Fighting Marines? There was a competition about who had managed to defeat more of them. Chores around the ship? There was a fight about who was fastest or could do more. No day went by with at least one little fight or competition between the swordsman and the cook. It was nothing to look twice at, and it was part of their daily lives by now. Honestly, it would probably freak everyone out more if they weren't fighting. That wasn't to say that they didn't get along. There were times when they could hold civil conversations or work together peacefully. But sadly, it wasn't nearly as often as some of the others would like. Next to the bickering about who was better at something, there was another common theme. The two would accuse the other of being boring or repetitive, like how Zoro was essentially a one-trick pony, never deviating from his fighting styles and showing no creativity or flexibility in his styles. Or how Sanji's behavior towards women wasn't only annoying, but also boring and expected. No break or development in his characteristics. Their fights or competitions often started with one or the other claiming to be the best at something, and that no one, especially not Sanji or Zoro, could even be considered competition. So it shouldn't have been a surprise to anyone that it had come to this. Their crew had decided to not party on the ship tonight. One reason was that they had 0 bottles of alcohol left and hadn't had the chance to restock yet. But if their captain wanted to party, they needed to party. So after only a minimal amount of complaining from Nami about the waste of money that would be, they had hit the local bar. The problem was that the local bar was also the only bar in a very tiny harbour town. They had stopped here in hopes of refilling their supplies, but had only been able to buy the bare necessities. They would have to find another harbour and soon. But to tide over their fun-loving captain, the bar solution had been proposed. So, after buying everything they could, they had settled at the biggest table in the small, dingy bar and started to demolish the stock of alcohol that still remained at the island. The evening had been going great. There had been minimal fighting between the Straw Hats and the villagers, and the Straw Hats and each other. The last few bottles of the evening had just been brought over to their table. While Brooke was distributing the bottles, Zoro and Sanji were locked in one of their heated debates about the other being unoriginal and boring. Boring! Sanji exclaimed, swinging his bottle through the air. I'll show you boring! And with that, he put the bottle to his lips and emptied it in a few big gulps. Zoro only snorted. And how's that not boring? I can do that in my sleep. He went to grab his bottle, but the cook was faster and swiped it right from underneath Zoro's nose. Enraged, Zoro turned back towards him, ready to chew him out, but the words were stuck in his throat. Sanji had already emptied the second bottle as well, and was now placing the 2 empty ones in front of Zoro. Beat that! He crowed out, delighted in his victory. Zoro was horrified. I can't, you shitty-ass cook! That was the last one! He looked around the table to make sure he wasn't mistaken, but every other one was already claimed or empty as well. Furious, he turned around to the cook. Give it back! Sanji just licked his lips before saying, No. He looked like the cat that had gotten the cream. Zoro blamed his next actions completely on the alcohol he had already consumed, and on desperately wanting to have the last word. He grabbed Sanji by the collar and pulled him in. Sanji, in anticipation of a fight, tried to lift his hands to defend himself, but only managed to lay them on top of Zoro's shoulders. His reflexes were already dulling from the amount of alcohol he had consumed in a short time, and it showed. If he had been faster, he would have stopped this. He was sure of this. Because the next thing he knew was that Zoro was pressing their lips together. In shock, he let out a small gasp. Zoro took advantage of the slight parted lips and parted them even more with his tongue. The rest of the table had fallen completely silent. No one dared to say anything or even move. Even Luffy seemed surprised by this turn of events. When the two of them separated, Sanji's face could rival Luffy's vest. Zoro licked his lips with a self-satisfied smirk. Thanks for the drink, even though the alcohol does taste shitty here. That brought Sanji back to himself. What the hell, Mosshead? That was my drink! Really? Nami asked. That's the thing you're mad about, not the kiss. That wasn't a kiss! both the cook and the swordsman exclaimed at the same time. No, it wasn't, Usopp agreed. That was a full-blown make-out session. Was that their first kiss? Robin asked, a curious tilt to her head. It wasn't a kiss! The two men yelled again, but went ignored. Wasn't there a kiss last week, in the hallway? Brooke threw in. No! The idiot mosshead ran into me because he has no awareness of his surroundings! Sanji practically screeched, his face still the colour of a tomato. And what about that week before that, when you were training outside? Didn't you kiss then? Frankie wanted to know. Hell no, Zoro yelled, arms crossed in front of his chest. I pinned that useless cook and won that sparring match, though. As if! I pinned you right back. You didn't win. So it wasn't a human mating dance. Interesting. Chopper mused, deep in thought. I need to remedy my notes then. You took notes on us. I have notes on all of you. Can I read the ones about me? Usopp asked excitedly. Hello, Nami yelled, thumping her fist against the table. Can we get back to the point here? You two, and she pointed at Zoro and Sanji, just totally made out with each other. No, we didn't, Zoro said, looking away from her. It was just me getting my drink back. He was just another container. I wanted my alcohol and I got it, so I won. Sanji's alcohol-muddled brain had decided to take a short break. He laid his head on the table and just tried to breathe and rationalize what just happened. It had been a kiss. Fuck. But... You know, Mosshead, he said, his head still laying on the table, but he glared up at Zoro. That was one hell of a shitty kiss. At the look of pure outrage on Zoro's face, Sanji sat up straight again. Like, for real, it was by far the shittiest kiss I ever got. Have you never kissed anyone before? The table was silent again. Even Luffy didn't say a word. Maybe the reason for that was the multiple hands that were covering his mouth and holding him down, but neither Zoro nor Sanji seemed to notice this small detail. Zoro furrowed his brows before looking away. He tried to take a sip from the empty bottle in his hands and grumbled in frustration. Like you know how to kiss. Now it was Sanji's turn to look outraged. Excuse me? I know a lot about this. Zoro snorted. Sure, you can't even get a date. How do you know more about this than me? Well, for one thing, I am an expert when it comes to romance. Like it's so hard. What do you need? A rose and a poem, is that it? Oh, curly brow, your flirting skills can only go below 0. Sanji looked at Zoro as if he had grown a second head. What was that supposed to be? He let out a hiccup, betraying his still inebriated status. Poetry! Don't make me laugh. Guys, Usopp tried to intervene. Let's talk about this, okay? We don't need to start another fight. Shut up! Both the cook and the swordsman shouted in unison, before standing up and facing each other. On the table, Luffy was clapping his hands in excitement for the oncoming fight. Nami just let out a sigh and rubbed a hand over her temple to try and stave off the headache those two always gave her. None of you could ever date. You're both terrible at expressing your feelings. That made both men stop in their movements and turn to stare at her. Zoro's face still showed a look of outrage, but Sanji's had morphed into one of true hurt. Nami-san, is that really how you think of me? He asked in a small sounding voice. Of course you still care about what that witch thinks of you. How pathetic can you be? You're just proving her point like that. Zoro may be fast enough to dodge or parry the attacks of all the great swordsmen in the world, but his reflexes would never save him from Nami throwing an empty bottle at his head. In those moments when she was angry, she could even beat Usopp when it came to accuracy. Cursing, he rubs at his throbbing head. And you're wrong, he says, slightly quieter than before, as if he isn't sure if he wants to be heard by the others or not. I could make anyone happy if I wanted to. I just didn't get the opportunity yet, or meet the right person for that. Now it was Sanji's turn to snort. You! Make anyone happy! Don't make me laugh, mosshead! The smirk he sends Zoro's way is a mixture of mean and smug. You couldn't find someone to like you if you tried. No way that shitty behaviour of yours can make anyone happy. And you could! With a dramatic gesture, Sanji places a hand against his chest and falls into a perfect half bow. I'm a cook. It is literally my job to make people happy. I have also worked as a host and I have manners, so if anyone can make their partner happy, it would be me. Oh. Robin, who had been silent for a long while, leaned forward in her chair, one hand supporting her chin. Zoro is immediately aware and suspicious of her. Nami was a witch and a devil, but Robin was cunning and downright dangerous. So both of you are confident in your abilities to make a potential partner happy, whoever that may be. Of course, Robin-chan. Whoever it would be, they would be the happiest with me. Zoro didn't want to play into Robin's hands, but he also couldn't not answer after that kind of declaration Sanji just made. So he straightened his shoulders and simply nodded. He was confident that he could pull this off, in a hypothetical kind of way. Robin smiled. Then how about this? If you can make anyone happy being with you, and since you've both been so into being surprising for the past couple of months, why don't you date each other? After all, both of you are confident in your abilities, and there wouldn't be a better test than this, would there? Sanji choked after hearing this. What? He yelled, scandalized. Me dating that moron? There's no way in hell that he could make me even remotely happy. Not in 100 years. He runs a hand through his hair, obviously frazzled. I mean, come on, that's ridiculous. He turned and faced Zoro, who hadn't said anything yet. The green-haired swordsman didn't even look at him. So what are the terms? He asked. Whoever can make the other admit they are happy first wins. Robin's smile was sweet and innocent, but no one was buying her act. And if no one admits to it? Well, the archaeologist pretends to think for a moment. I guess whoever forfeits first loses. Sanji is still flustered, and the alcohol still buzzing through his body didn't help his ability to form words. His eyes were still on Zoro. Their eyes met, and Sanji swallowed heavy, his throat suddenly dry. He knew what that look in the other's eyes meant. He knew what would happen next. Zoro only said a single word. Okay. And Sanji knew he was fucked. His face was heating up, and his body was itching in an obvious fight-and-flight instinct. Sanji didn't know which one would win out in the end. He opened his mouth to deny the challenge. There was simply no way he could date Zoro. But before he could say anything, his eye caught on Robin's small smile, and he remembers the second part of the challenge. Be surprising. He was pretty sure there was no way he could win that challenge, but the chance that Zoro could was even lesser. So all Sanji had to do was convince Zoro to throw in the towel, right? And this would be a golden opportunity to mess with the other to his heart's content. If he thought about it this way, there was no way that Sanji could lose. Except maybe his dignity, but really, when had any Straw Hat ever cared about that? While Sanji was going through his thought process, Zoro was panicking internally. Why was he going along with this? There was no way in hell he was going to win this, and he didn't accept a challenge he wasn't at least somewhat sure he could win. And there was none. His thoughts wandered to his idiot captain for a second, and he wondered if stupidity was contagious. After all, why hadn't he simply said he wasn't interested in romance? No, he had to get tiled up by the stupid cook and that witch and started claiming things he had no idea of. Why did he have to say that he could have anyone he wanted? Why did he get manipulated so easily? And even more importantly, why did he kiss the stupid cook in the first place? Just to get the last word in? That seemed to have worked out great for him. Fine, Sanji's cocksure voice broke through his thought process. You're on, honey. Oh, hell no. It was so on. That stupid cook would go down. Of course, darling. Zoro was sure the grin on his face was more of a baring of teeth, but since Sanji wasn't looking any different, he was sure no one would mind. Marvellous, Robin said, still wearing that mysterious smile of hers. She lifted her bottle. A toast to the happy couple. A toast! The rest of their horrible, horrible crewmates chimed in, everyone raising their bottles in excitement. Now that that's cleared up, why don't you two sit down again? Nami asked, and gestured to the two chairs who were still toppled over on the ground. A bit stilted and awkward, the two men picked up their chairs and sat down. The conversation around the table continued, but both Zoro and Sanji weren't sure what to do now. What did people who were dating do? Kissing was the obvious answer, but that wouldn't be appropriate right now. And weird. It would be weird as fuck. This was a simple prank, nothing more. Just a way to prove that the other was wrong and to win. There was no need to go to such lengths just to win. But on the other hand, they did want to win, and if that involved a bit of kissing, so be it. Zoro looked over to Sanji, determined to do something. His eyes met that of the blonde, and both men hurriedly looked away again. This was ridiculous. Why could he suddenly not hold eye contact with the stupid idiot anymore? Just because they were dating now? At that thought, Zoro felt the heat start to crawl up into his face. He was in a relationship with the cook. Even if it was only for a bet, it was still a fact. What the fuck? Their crew didn't linger for a lot longer, having already cleared out any alcohol the bar had to offer. As a group, they made their way back towards the Sunny. Out of habit, Sanji ended up next to Zoro. Most of the time, it was his job to keep the swordsman on the right path when it came to directions. But since when? It had never been talked about officially, it just happened. He was ripped out of his thoughts by a warm hand that wrapped around his own. Shocked, he looked first down to his hand, which was indeed being held by another, and after that looked up towards the owner of said hand. Zoro's face was a dark shade of red. He was clearly uncomfortable with the situation. But the look on his face dared Sanji to let go. Never one to back down from Zoro's challenges, Sanji only returned the tight grip. Both were able to keep the eye contact for a few seconds before looking away at the same time. Shit. They were both flustered messes, just from one simple handhold. If they wanted to win this bet, they needed to seriously up their game. Ta-da! So, I was gone for quite a while. That would be because some stuff happened, and that kind of took over for a while. But I am back. This is, I believe, this fic is 6 chapters long, so I will get those. I'll probably record those today as well, and then I'll edit them, put them out at some point. Anyway, thank you for listening to the end. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.